Greetings, BUSN 1360 Software Apps for Business Students. I'm Dr. McGrory, and today we enter Excel Chapter 5, which is our final chapter in our studies of Excel, and we're going to talk about adding charts and analyzing data. Now, you've seen charts a little bit in the past, and you've seen some tables in our past chapters, but today this is going to get much more powerful. In this chapter, you're going to explore pivot tables and pivot charts. You're going to look at data tables and how they can be used to filter and sort very quickly. We are going to add a line chart and look at some of the settings on that, but you're also going to learn tools that are going to just really blow your mind, like Goal Seek, which is a really powerful tool in Excel, and the data table analysis tool. You're going to really love it. So make sure you watch this entire video. Now, this is part one of the video. I anticipate that this will be a long video, so we've chopped it up into two parts. Make sure you watch both pieces because you want to do more than just click the buttons in this particular chapter and in all chapters. You want to understand why you're doing what you're doing and to really understand the steps. So let's jump in and do this together. I've already created my Excel 5 folder on my desktop. And if I open that folder, you can see I've already downloaded the start file and the solution file. You know I like to look at the solution file because, again, we need to understand in context what we're doing. So this is the solution file, and it looks like we are involved in real estate sales or tracking that. And goodness, this is quite the graph, isn't it? So we have this spike going up here, and then it drops down. But I really get a lot of information out of this because of the data labels that are on there. It looks like on April 18th, 2026, that there was a sale for $355,000. And so we can track some of these different sales and really get some quick information. It's hard to see on this solution file, but I can also see a line going up and down next to the points on the graph. So, you know, this spike here. And those are kind of high-low estimations on your graph. So you can say this value is within an average, for example. So that's a nice graph. Whoops. This document is 4 pages, I think, and I skipped past. There we go, page number 2. And this offers some really interesting Excel features. So we see, for example, this graph, and this is very colorful, bar chart that we see here. So very nicely color-coded. And if we look out to the side, I see like a mini graph. Now, we experimented earlier in a previous chapter with conditional formatting where we could add data bars, and we saw the data bars adjust. This is a little bit different because this is a graph in essence, kind of a data bar, right here in the cell. See how this is in cell G5? So we're going to look at that. Really great information there. On to this third page of the solution file. Let me just use my magnification buttons down here. So again, really interesting information. I can see the rows over here on the side because they chose to print those. And I see that some of them are in blue. And in fact, not all of the rows are listed. And that's really what we're going to see that blue means, is that some rows are hidden. As I look across, I see nice information, and I have a nice totals row down here towards the bottom. So really good information. So this was page 3. I'm going to advance to page 4. So this is page 4, and this really introduces something that is very, very powerful in Excel. And when you look at this table, you can't see the formulas and functions in the solution file. What I want you to think about is what you learned in your sim book for this chapter that would make completing this table lightning fast. That's what we're going to look at. So, you know, if you are planning to buy a car, planning to buy a house, making some big purchases, this is a fantastic tool. You can see some of the key things, the interest rates that they have here, the amount that they're going to borrow, the years in this case, it could be months that you're going to pay this off, and little variations in this, as you know, can make a big difference. But how can you figure out that difference or calculate that difference really fast? In other words, if I call around to different banks and I get a slightly different interest rate, how does that impact the amount that I can borrow? How does that impact what my monthly payments are going to be? So does not convey the power that you're going to see as we go through this exercise. So let's close this solution file and let's go ahead and open up our start file. And I'm going to enable editing, and let me make that full screen. I have already logged into SimNet and I've opened up my instructions. And let's look at the case. The real estate department needs a comprehensive analysis of their property data to make informed investment decisions. They've tasked you with organizing and interpreting this data to provide clear insights and actionable recommendations. And isn't that what analysis is all about? It says in this project you will analyze real estate data, you'll convert the data into tables for better organization, you'll apply table style options, because again we want it to look professional, because when we make it look professional, the information is communicated more clearly. Additionally, you're going to sort and filter the data to highlight key information and trends. You'll also add some data visualizations, that means the charts. So you'll create pivot tables and pivot charts. And if you haven't seen these, you're going to love them. Very practical tool. Now let's look at the skills that we're going to use in this chapter. So we've read about some of these in the case. Converting data into tables, working with table styles, naming our table. Well, you know how to name cells, for example. We're going to sort, we're going to filter, we're going to insert that line chart, error bars. That was what those up and down lines are. Creating pivot tables, using recommended pivot tables, inserting spark lines. Spark lines are, it didn't look like a line, did it? But that's what those little bitty columns in the cell looked like. So we're going to see more about that. And we're going to analyze with data tables and with goal seek. These are powerful, powerful features in Excel that you're going to love. So we've already opened our start file and we enabled editing. On to step number 3. We're going to select any cell, and it looks like on this sales data worksheet, we're going to format it. And we know how to do that using a quick style, dark teal table style medium 2. So let me just move these instructions out of the way. And make sure down here at the bottom that you're on the Sales Data tab. When you are working with a table, these rows tend to be connected unless you deliberately disconnect them. How do you do that? When they say click inside the table, anywhere inside the table, that really selects the entire table. Excel understands that you want changes to apply to the table. If, however, maybe accidentally, you select 2 cells, then Excel says, oh, you're talking about just these 2 cells. So, for example, that could negatively affect a sort, especially if sometimes people will select the majority of a table, but perhaps you don't see this very last column in your table. If that happens and you begin to sort, this last column would not necessarily follow the sort. But think about that. When you click any cell in the table, it understands that March 26, 2027 is related to Century 21, is related to Watkins, is related to Contemporary, is related to 3-bedroom. If you continue on to study about Microsoft Access databases, you'll learn about relational databases. And this is what we're talking about right here in Excel. Excel is, we think, more of worksheets, but it has a little bit of a database ability because it relates these cells when they're formatted without any spaces in between the columns, without any solid row that is empty. Now you might have one empty cell in a row, that's understandable, but the entire row is not empty. Also, these column headings, these are unique bedrooms, bathrooms, fireplace. There's no duplication in the name of the column. This allows Excel to really make those relationships. So now that we understand that, let's click anywhere inside the table, and we are going to make sure we're on the Home tab. And we are really going to convert this into a table, because in this Styles area, notice that this is where we found conditional formatting, and this is where at one point we found cell styles, but right in between it says Format as Table. So when I click on this, my styles are grouped into light, medium, and dark, and they've told us we want a medium style. They want teal, and it looks like it's the second one over. They didn't tell us this time, but it looks like it's the second option in the medium section. So dark teal, table style, medium 2. Click that. It says, is this your table from A1 to L139? Well, we could scroll down to verify that. That looks correct. And Excel figured that out because of the connections between the columns and the rows of our related table. Notice that it says my table has headers, and that box is checked for me. Make sure yours is also checked, and we do have headers. And Excel recognized that because they are formatted differently than the rest of the data. In this case, they're bold. So whenever you're creating a table, make sure those headers going across the top are in bold. I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. Look at that. Our table, let me deselect it, has these banded rows going across. If you have ever gotten reports from a mainframe, for example, they had what they called green bar reports because the paper was pre-formatted with these different bars, because it helps you keep track as you look along a row. Well, Excel will do that for us. And guess what? They don't even tell us to do this, but I'm going to show you. You know how to insert a row. Right-click on top of a column and insert. And if you noticed, I didn't have to manually reformat all these rows. Automatically, these rows are alternately formatted. In this case, as kind of a light blue and then white, light blue and then white. So I'm going to Control Z to undo that. And you can see again that formatting is perfect, alternating rows. So they don't want that though, right? So we did this first part. We selected the cell, we formatted the table, and we applied this dark teal table style medium. And it says verify that the table has headers. So we did that. We did a good job on step number 3. On to step 4. This is what I was giggling about. It says on the Table Design tab, look for Table Style Options and click Banded Rows to remove that checkbox. You might remember that we did something similar in our study of Microsoft Word. Well, let's move these instructions out of the way. And I want you to notice at the top, I have an additional ribbon. Now that I've converted this into a table, I have a Table Design ribbon. And on this table design, I have many things that I can do. But in this section that says Table Style Options, I have header row, so it knows my header row. And I have total row, we're going to come back to that. But banded rows is selected. Uncheck that box. And now you can see I don't have that alternate coloring on the rows. Okay, I guess that's their choice. Let's save that. You know, one reason you may want to do that is if you are printing this to like a black and white laser printer, or if you're going to make copies of it where the copies are black and white, sometimes that shading on the row can make the data really difficult to read. Now they want us to name the table, and we know how to name things, but very specifically to call this sales data. So let's move this out of the way. Now, in the past, when we have named cells or named a range of cells, we selected them first. But remember, this is a relational table. you could go so far as to call it a relational database. So these cells are interconnected because we followed the rules. There's no completely empty column, that separates the data, because if so, it would not recognize it as one table. So it wouldn't even necessarily see it as two tables. It would stop the table at that break. We don't have any completely empty rows. Our column names are unique going across. Consequently, when we click anywhere in that table, and it has me with table design ribbon, over here, it's assigned this default table name, table 1. Well, if I have 2 or 3 or 4 tables, I won't remember what table 1 is. So let's call it sales data using that camel case. Press your enter key, and it understands that it is this entire range of cells. And in fact, if I insert additional rows into the middle of this table, then the table range will automatically expand. That was step 5. On to step 6. Now, step 6 looks long, but let's just see what we're doing. It says we're going to add a total row to the table to display the number of buyers, the average number of bedrooms and bathrooms for each sale, the average purchase price, interest rate, and mortgage length. So what we're really talking about is adding a total row and then adding all these totals. Now, we know how to do that using formulas, but when you have a table set up like this, Excel makes it super easy because it is a database now. So you're making that transition onto a database, correct? Let's move these instructions out of the way. We're on our table design ribbon. And remember I said we'd come back to total row. Well, here it is. Check that box. When you do, down at the bottom, look at this new row that was added. And I want you to notice several things. I want you to notice, you see that my mouse is now 4-sided arrow? Because this entire table is selected. And what I mean by that is that your total row is a very special row of the table. There's something important you must understand about databases. Databases cannot be interrupted with a subtotal or with an average. So all of the data values in these columns, and let's really commit this, to our understanding, they are the same. If this says purchase price, there is no total of purchase price or average of purchase price in the middle of this column. The same with the interest rate. These are all interest rates. There's not suddenly the number of bedrooms or bathrooms, and we haven't done a count or an average or a minimum or a maximum formula here. It's all consistent. And if we suddenly decided we were going to total this as part of our table, it would mess up the sorting. If you sorted, from the largest value to the least value, your total would always be at the top. So we need Excel to understand that this total is with the table, but it's special. It's a special row. So that's kind of an important thing here. When we added this total row, it kind of by default tends to do this at this it goes towards the end, number of mortgage years, and looks like it did something here. Maybe it added it or I don't know. We'll look at this in just a moment, because when I click on that, and I'm using my selector mouse, I click puffy white plus sign, I click squarely on that, you can see there's a drop down arrow to the right. And when I click on that, it is a sum. And here are my functions and even more functions that I can use. And by the way, how great is this for math class and for statistics? Standard deviation, variance. Excellent. Okay, we're going to come back to that. Let's follow our instructions. In the buyers column, click in your total row. Now again, puffy white plus sign, click in your total row, and they want a count. So all I have to do is click on this drop down arrow. Now, am I counting numbers or am I count A? We learned that function earlier, correct? Click on count, just plain old count. And it tells me 138 are in this column. But look up at your formula bar, that truth detector up here. It tells us it's not the count function. It says subtotal. This is a database function. And how does it know to count? That's what this reference 103 is about. And instead of giving us a range of cells, it's saying buyers, and it put that inside of square brackets. So you're learning more syntax. That's what this is called. What syntax have you learned already? You've learned dollar signs around cells, around the column and the row, make absolute references. You've learned that bang symbol after the worksheet name identifies it as a worksheet name. So now you're learning new syntax, which is those square brackets indicate a field name, and the field is buyers. So we wouldn't necessarily refer to that as a column name anymore because we're working in a database table, right, where everything is related across each row. And 103, you don't have to remember that, but 103 is for counting. Let's keep going. Under bedrooms, in this field at the very bottom, I'm going to select again, and this time they want us to use that drop-down box and select average. We have that same cell selected, and that function number happens to be 101, as compared to buyers, which was a count, which is 103, as compared to mortgage, and that was a sum, if you remember, and that's 109. We didn't have to remember any of that because Excel is taking care of it. Our next instruction is to click in the total row under bathrooms, and we're using our drop-down box again to average that. So 1.449275362 bathrooms. So we might need to do some formatting on this. Purchase price, but they don't tell us to, so let's follow our instructions. Purchase price, I'm clicking in the total row under that field, and purchase price, they want an average. And for the rate, which is the next one over, they also want an average. And underneath mortgage, now this is where it assumed that we wanted a sum, and it tends to assume that. And we actually want an average. Let's save that. And you can see that's not a pretty average either. In other words, there's a lot of places after the decimal there, and we probably want to round that down to about 2 places. So that was step number 6. And how easy did Excel make that? On to step 7. They want us to sort the data, so the newest purchases appear at the top. And so we're looking at this field, date of purchase. Now this is kind of interesting because they say we're going to look at this data tab, and if you work with a lot of data in Excel, you really want to explore this data tab because there's so many things you can do. But they want us to use that data tab to sort and filter in Z to A, not A to Z, but Z to A. I'm going to move this out of the way. And I don't think we've saved. Let's make sure that we save our work. So we're looking in particular at date of purchase, which is this very first field. And I'm going to control home to move up to the top. Because as I look at this, I don't think they're in any order right now. And we did save that, right? We saved that. What I like about these tables, and I think you'll like this as well, is do you see that each of the field names has a drop-down box? And they say we can sort oldest to newest. It does not say A to Z or Z to A because Excel recognizes that as a date. So instead of talking about it from an alphabetical perspective, it's saying, do you want newer dates or older dates? So lots of things. Look at this. You can sort by colors. I mean, we're going to look at all of this, and this is a sneak peek ahead to filtering. But because this is a date field, see how it understood years? It didn't list each and every value there. It recognized that it should group this into years. And I can expand that to very quickly see I only have 2 different months in here, January and March. And for this other year, I have April, July, and September. And as you can see from these plus signs, I can keep drilling down into this data. Is this not powerful? This is awesome. I'm canceling this because they didn't tell us to do this in the instructions. I've clicked in this date of purchase field. What they told us to do is to go to the data ribbon. Now take a moment, pause the video, and look at the many different things that you can do on this data ribbon. But they asked us to come to sort and filter. And I see that one button is already depressed. That's this filter button. When I click on that again, those little drop-down boxes go away. Well, I love those, so I'm putting those back on because I think that's a great asset of a table. But over here in this sorting area, here's where we have A to Z and Z to A. So I'm going to click this Z to A button. Now watch the date of purchase field. And so Z to A is from 2027 down to 2026. So from the newest date to the oldest date. So we can see that. And did you notice the rows? I just did a Control Z, and I see that my buyers are Bond, Scott, and Johnson. I'm going to Control Y to redo, and now my buyers are Bond, Nix, and Hairless. So not only did the date of purchase change, but the rows shuffled with them. So as the sort order changed, the record stayed together. So we're using some new terms. This is a database table, and the columns are not necessarily columns, they're fields, and the rows are records. Save that. I will show you one more. See this sort button? Click on that. What it tells us is our current sorts. And notice that we can have multiple levels of sorts. Think of our student names. What if we had 4 students named Smith? Who should come first? If you just say sort by Smith, any one of those Smiths could appear first. But if you have Anna Smith and then Betty Smith, you could have sort by last name, and then you could add a level to then sort by first name. This is cool stuff, and this is why I say this video is going to be just a little bit longer. I want you to understand why you're doing this, and I want you to really take a push back from the trees and look at this forest because, man, is it awesome. Let's go back. Date of purchase, that was step 7. Let's bring step 8 up. We're going to filter the data. So we sorted, but to filter means everything doesn't get through the funnel. We only look at some of the data. So we're going to show only houses sold by owner with 3 or 4 bathrooms. So first of all, we're filtering, and second of all, we're doing that with 2 different criterias. And in fact, you might even look at it as 3 criterias. We're concerned with who sold it and how many bedrooms, and the bedrooms could be 3 or it could be 4. But in terms of sold by, only the owner. Let's do it. Move those instructions out of the way. And under the Agent tab, and I want you to look at Data Purchase. Do you see that arrow on the button? That's telling you, hey, this button is doing something. There has been something applied, and in this case, a sort. So under the Agents tab, click on that drop down, or I should say on the Agents field, click on that drop down box. Now again, you can see all these different things that you can do, like I said, even by color, which is just amazing. As you go on down here, first of all, here's something I like. I can immediately see the different types of agents that we have here. We have by owner, by Century 21, by Homes and Garden, Remax, Willemans. Something that I have found very useful for this is, let's say we had a typo. And instead of let me stay in the agent field here. Instead of by owner with a space in it, I'm going to double click that cell so I can edit it. I forgot to space. So I deleted the space and I pressed my enter key. And when I press my drop down box now, I can immediately see that because these are each unique values. So this list is a list of all your unique values. And it's really helpful because then I can go directly to that value and I can fix it. So how would I do that? I'm previewing some instructions we're about to see. First of all, instead of seeing all the records, I'm going to click select all to deselect that. I would click the record or the value that's in error, click OK. Now that I can see that error, I'm going to put my space back in, press my enter key, and I'm going to go back to that filter button. And do you see the little funnel on that button now? So if there's a sort, I can see the arrow. If it's been filtered, I will see that funnel. Click on that drop down box again. This is an additional demonstration set, and I'm going to select all and click OK. So now all my records are there. So what did they want? Back to our instructions. They said click on this drop down box for agent, click the select all to deselect everything, because what we want to select is by owner. That's the only thing that we're interested in. Click on OK. Okay, so we have a smaller set of records. And if I look at the rows on the left, they're in blue, and I can see that numbers are missing. For example, I go 1, 2, 5. So the rows 3 and 4 are simply hidden. And what does hidden mean? It means that their height, in this case, has been reduced to 0. So it's a filtered view. They're still in the table. It's just a filtered view. But we're not done yet. We're going to come over here to bedrooms, and we're going to click again this drop-down box. And again, we're going to click select all so that this is deselected. And this time we're going to pick 2 criteria. We're interested in 3 or 4 bedrooms. And so that's what that means, 3 or 4. And I'm going to click on OK. And as I look at my bedrooms now, I only see those bedrooms if it's 3 and 4, and I only see the agent. So from one field to the next field, the condition is and. It must be by owner and 4 bedrooms, or by owner and 3 bedrooms. Save that. Don't you just feel like you can do so much now? Do you see why businesses really desire employees who have these skills? Because we are in a data-rich world right now. And so being able to sort and filter data, very important. On to step number 9. We're going to create a line chart showing the purchase prices for houses by date. And of course, we saw that in the solution file. And you're kind of familiar with charts, but let me move this out of the way. And they're introducing a little extra skill here, because when we created a chart in our previous studies, we selected contiguous cells. We went across. Contiguous meaning they're all touching. But in this case, we don't want to graph kind of everything. We want date of purchase, so they do not want us to select the data heading, and they do not want the total. So I'm going to press and drag from that first value, March 27th, 2027, down to this last value, April 18th, 2026. Now, with that selected, I am going to hold my control key down and come over here to purchase price. So with my control key held down, press and drag, again selecting just those values. Release your control key, release your mouse. So now I have 2 ranges of cells selected that are not contiguous. They're not touching. With both of those selected, and you know that cell A2 is selected, with those 2 groups of cells selected, we're going to go to Insert, and we're going across to Charts. And on this Charts section, do you see this button that says Insert Line or Chart Area? Click on that. And they want us just to pick the very first line chart type. So it's just a simple one, but I'm going to click on that. You can see we have all kinds. And so there is my very quick graph. And that pattern looks like what we saw in the solution file. Now we're not done yet, and they told us just to move it, or have they told us to move it? No, they haven't told us to move it yet. A word of caution with graphs: be careful as you click on it, because remember, you can select things inside your graph. And so you don't want to make changes yet. If you're double-clicked or clicked on something, just click away and then click back in what looks like a safe space. In other words, it doesn't look like there's anything in that part of the graph. And then I just look, where are the dots? Right, they're only on the outside. I'll point out you have a chart design ribbon and a format ribbon that go along with this chart. Let's go back to our instructions, and that was step number 9. On to step number 10. Now we're going to move the chart, and we're going to move it to its own sheet, and we're going to name that sheet for sale by owner. So that is a very common thing to do. Let's just move these instructions out of the way. Sometimes you like to have this chart floating on top of the data. Sometimes that's really nice. And you could move this, and a nice thing to do as you move it is move it so that when you print, that you have the detailed data table there, but you also have the graph, so that, for example, your boss can see both. In that way, if they have a question, they can look to the data table for that detail. But we want it on its own sheet. So I've got my chart selected, and up on the chart design tab, that ribbon, if you look across, and we have all kinds of things we can do here, at the very end, there's a button that says Move Chart. Now, right now, our workbook has 2 worksheets in it. Click on Move Chart, and it says, right now, I see it as an object in, and that's great, except we want to go to a new sheet. It selected the words Chart 1. We're going to call this For Sale by Owner. And I'm going to click OK. And I have a new worksheet in my workbook, and that entire worksheet is this graph. If I go back to sales data, my chart is gone, but as my data changes, if tomorrow I enter a new sale by owner, my graph, my chart will update. Save that. That was step 10. Let's try to go a little bit further here. It says update the chart title and display the data labels as callouts. In other words, kind of off to the side a little bit. So we are familiar with this. Let's move these instructions out of the way. First of all, I'm going to click chart title. So the dots are around chart title. I could double click and get my flashing cursor inside there and type, but if you will just select the entire box, that's what you want selected, and start typing. So you're going to change the chart title to For Sale by Owner. You'll notice it's in my formula bar. When I press my Enter key, the chart title will update. We talked about that in a previous video. So that can be a preferred method because you can then start to automate that by having it reference a cell on your worksheet. Save that. We're not done yet, but save that. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to add those data labels. So do you remember when we studied charts in Word and also earlier in Excel, we have these nice buttons across the upper corner here. And I'm going to go to this first button, the plus sign. These are chart elements. When you expand that, you can see that I already have some axes displayed, I have the chart title displayed, and I even have some grid lines. But they want us to look at data labels. So they say to check the box. You can certainly do that, but you can just come straight over here to the arrow. And as I hover over these things, I hope you can see on the chart that data labels are being added. I'm going to go to this arrow, because the data labels that we want are called data callouts. So I'm going to select that. Okay. And remember, when you have finished making selections, I kind of expect it to go away after I've clicked, but you have to click that plus sign again. So these are data labels, and they're called callouts, this particular type of data label. Why are they called callouts? Because if you can see, for example, on this September 13th, 2026 data point, that it's not just a data label next to the data point. There is what they call a callout. There is an attachment from that to the data point on the graph. So that's why it's called a callout. Save that. Did we save that? Back to our instructions. On to step 12. Add error bars to the chart. And these are kind of cool. So again, this is a chart element. Let me move these instructions off to the side. Make sure my chart is selected. And then I'll see this plus sign. And when I click on this plus sign, you'll see error bars. Now, when I hover over it, you already see the error bars there, and they've asked us simply to check that box, which we can do. I do want to point out, see this little arrow, because you may be saying, well, how does it know what the error is? Well, it depends on what you set. By default, it's going to be a standard error. So if you take knowledge from your probability and statistics class, it could be a percent of error, it could be the standard deviation, and you can even customize it further than that. But they did not ask us to get into that. They just said, they just wanted these error bars so you can see, and that's based on your data. So click that plus sign to collapse that. So it's on September 13th, it's within $440,000. That's our data point, but that's within a margin of error. Save that. Bring our instructions back. On to step 13. Well, our chart needs a little formatting to make it look good. So they say apply the style 11 quick style to the chart. It says the button appears near the upper right corner of the chart. So it does, and I will tell you, okay, so I'm going to make sure my chart is active. And what they're talking about is this little paintbrush. And if you click that, and you can see there's two menu options here. I'm on the styles, and you can scroll through here to get to number 11. Oh, and that was lucky. I just kind of randomly scrolled down, and as I hovered my mouse over it, I can see style 11, and I'm going to click that. That's the style they want. So you can see that. If you are having a hard time determining which style is number 11, I sometimes find it easier to see by going to this chart design ribbon, and here are chart styles here, and you can click on this drop down box, and in this arrangement it's in this second row, the third one over. So if that makes it a little easier, that's style 11. And again, you can see all types of options up here. I'm going to click that paintbrush again to make that go away. I'm going to save that. And that was step 13. So how many steps do we have in this? Well, it looks like we have about 18 pretty serious steps. Let's see if we can maybe go just a little bit further. It says now we're going to create a pivot table. Well, let's stop then, because these steps continue on to talk about pivot tables and pivot charts. So we'll stop at step 14, and we'll pick back up here in the next video. Thanks, folks. Join me in the next video.